Yes, sir, baby, on the Radar Radio. Yo, joining me today, I got a motherfucking legend in the building. I'm so excited. Asher fucking Roth is here. What up, bro? You gotta get like the little air horns in there. What's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Thank you for having me.
I'm so pumped. You know, it's funny because when Aaron sent me the email, it's like one of those emails that like you see and you're like, no fucking way. Like you're like, no way. And thinking of how, you know, when you first popped on the scene, I think I just started high school, and a lot of your music was part of that soundtrack of high school and going into college. And so when I got this email, I was just like, yes.
So we kind of grew up together.
We did kind of grow up together.
I like that. I like that age group of kind of being on the scene when people are kind of coming into adolescence. I feel like you were able to relate to what I was talking about.
Exactly.
And aspire to be like, man, I'm gonna do that, I'm doing this. So it's a good time to be alive.
Right. My goal is to not bring up I Love College, but in the sense of like when I was in high school, that time really got me geared up into like the party scene. You know what I'm saying?
You got it, man. That's the thing. A lot of people, you know, we laugh about it because there would be like fifth graders and sixth graders that were singing I Love College. But that's the beauty of music. To your point of what you're talking about, it kind of like really is a checkpoint in a place and time in your life that when you listen to it, it kind of teleports you right back to it. Exactly.
And you know, when you look at like, what I want to talk about, I definitely want to talk about how from then to now and kind of like the type of music you're making now. But in that period of time, it was so interesting because there was like, I felt like the college touring and like the college shows and that type of sound. Cause like, you know, we have different sounds in hip hop that come and go. You know, right now the drill sound is really hot. And this is still hot now, but like the emo punk sound has been around for years now. But I remember back then it was so like the college, it was a college sound that not that nobody talked about it, but it was kind of like this thing in the consciousness where there were like college tours, college rapping, college hip hop that would be popping up. And I remember going to shows at Irving Plaza and the Roseanne Ballroom that doesn't exist anymore, you know, in high school and seeing these type of shows and seeing rappers like yourselves. And, you know, I saw G-Eazy early on and who was touring with like Tory Lanez and Kyle back in the day. And I think that was such an interesting period of time that I feel like doesn't always get talked about as much in hip hop.
And do you mean like the circuit in general or just this kind of like subgenre that was created?
Like both.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I do. I mean, obviously when you're in it, and just from my experiences, I think also what you're referring to is the birth of the internet as well. So it's like college radio has always been a thing. I mean, Stretch and Bobbito and all that stuff, like
legends.
That stuff has always been like kind of a place where you could play and put on kind of, for lack of better words, unadulterated music. And so the college circuit, I think by the time that I got in, like to your point, in a way, was starting to become a thing, a mainstream thing that you could sell. And so I don't know if that consciously was what we were doing, but it just kind of happened. And I think as a result of that happening, there started to be create a subgenre of people who weren't necessarily you know, mainstream or were getting record deals or whatever, but were falling under this umbrella that was around more of a collegiate lifestyle, so to speak.
Right. And even just like going to the like, and it was definitely like a moment in time because you had like obviously college kids, you had high school kids all going to like the circuit of shows. And it was, I don't know, it was just such a fun time because the music was fun, the music was positive, the music was, for sure. You know, it was just one of those things that you went there to have a good time. That's what I loved about it.
I remember being with Cara Lewis and Cheryl, and we had one of our first shows in New York City, and they turned to each other. This is like their you know, feedback to me when they looked at each other and goes, "Oh my God, we're having a good time." Like, I think that's what was so funny about kind of coming into the scene, was that people were coming to Asher Roth shows, whether by choice or just by curiosity, and leaving and being like, I just had a lot of fun. Or they met this is the stuff that I get a lot on the streets, so they met somebody at an Asher Roth show that is now whether their lover or a best friend or somebody significant in their lives. And like, you know, as you get older, you realize that those are extremely important moments and important things for me. So as far as performance in general, and as far as that era of what you're talking about, I know you had mentioned early on, you're like, oh, like I don't really want to bring up I Love College, and there was even a part of my life where I was kind of trying to get away from it actively.
Okay.
You know, but in the same respects, as I reflect on it now in my life, it's such an amazing time and such a cool moment for so many other people, yourself included, that there's no reason for me to be like, let's pretend that didn't happen.
Right.
You know?
It was just fun when you would be at parties in high school and like that song would be playing and we're like 15, 16 years old.
Man, could you imagine though, if like, as far as what trips me out is like, as far as where social media is now,
yeah,
you know, that Snapchats of the world, these kind of stories, all of these things didn't exist when I Love College was fresh out. I mean, if I Love College came out with all of those same
TikTok
tools,
too,
it would have been insane.
I wonder, you know, I meant to check and I definitely forgot to do it, but I wanted to see how many videos like I Love College has on TikTok.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, you know, obviously that's universal, and so they have to kind of be behind it. But
interesting. I thought it might have already been on there, or someone has to have uploaded it.
Well, you would imagine so, right? That people would want to be interacting with that song. But yeah, dude, who knows? I mean, that's something that I have fun with because it just seems like it's a forever tune. It's
people do have videos to it. That's funny.
That's fun, man.
But even like, if you think about back then, like if people were making the videos and the Snapchats and all that back then, you're like, oh shit, man, it's crazy.
I mean, literally the lyric in I Love College is, I wish we taped it. And that's just off the table now. Everything is taped. So, no, great time. I reflect on it, honestly, you know, very fondly.
I didn't even think about the birth of the internet, like calling it that.
Yeah.
But it was funny because when I was on TikTok one day, I saw this kid talking about, he's like, I wanted to do this think piece about the birth of the internet. Like what he called on TikTok? He called it like the lost years. And it was like 2011 to 2014. And it was just like a collage of like different pictures of notable things that happened during that time. Like some things with Beyonce, the Kardashians, you know, like whatever a viral moment in 2011 to 2014 would be. And I, you know, now that you mention it, like that was definitely part of it because, you know, that was obviously the early birth of like the SoundCloud era. And then like just the way that I feel like the artists during that time who were coming up, like yourself and like, you know, a bunch of others who were on like in that like circuit and doing those things, like were like interacting with their fans in like kind of a different way that we don't really see anymore, and may have not even seen up until that point like that. Because I remember when I would go to these shows, there would obviously be like a ton of meet and greets. Artists would go outside to see the line, like things like that. Like there was a lot going on during that time that was different. And that was obviously like the birth of Vine and things like that during that time. So there was like a lot going on too.
Well, it's a trip too, because now like what you're talking about with like the TikToks of the world, they're breaking music. You know what
literally
I mean? They are the ones that are actually saying, here's a new song that everyone's going to listen to. And we're breaking it here. So, you know, and that's happened in a pretty quick amount of time. And so, you know, when I get into the game and, you know, and 08, and so with that being said, the internet is like not all the way, it has not all the way infiltrated music business. Labels are still very much a thing. Radio, college radio, street teams are still a thing. Shout out to Steve Rifkin, all of those things. And so by the time 2011 rolls around, 2013 rolls around, now the internet has, and SoundCloud, and like you're talking about, has kind of taken hold, and people are starting to talk about you don't need record labels and you don't need all of those things. And so myself, the cool kids, Wale has done a good job, Cuddy's done a good job, but there's people who are on like kind of that, while that world started to take shape, constantly adjusting. And so what's nice about my career is that this is probably the first time in a really long time, if ever, that I've been able to play offense again. Because I think for the last, 10 years of my career, I've been playing defense. And so do you know what I mean by that? It's just kind of like adjusting to the new rules, and then also kind of like, participating. We're still dealing with perception of just that I Love College white kid. And so it's been fun, man. I mean, to be honest with you, it's been a challenge and it's been a lot of fun. And people like yourself who put on for independent artists and up and coming artists, and then having someone like me come through and talk to you about what I've experienced is very valuable for someone like myself and the kids you talk to.
Definitely the kids need to understand some of these things. And we were talking a little bit before the interview, but the owner of the studio, shout out my boy Devon Terrell, he was like, when I was here last night, because I did an interview last night, he was like, I'll tell Asher thank you, because he showed me, and he showed many artists out here, that like it is possible to do it independently. You know what I'm saying?
It is possible, but you also have to completely reimagine your expectations. You kind of have to understand that the goals and the numbers are going to be a little bit different as far as the verge of success. You know, and that's the thing. I think that there's a lot of conversation around independence right now, and I think that there's a lot of conversation around owning your intellectual property, but it's also important for up-and-coming artists and established artists who want to cut ties, and I'm sure they do understand that you still need a team of people. You still need people who are on your side helping you out. You can only go so far by yourself. And so like there's two things like that I would recommend a lot of up and coming artists go as far as they can by themselves.
Right.
And I think it's natural for a lot of us to say the first person that comes through and says, let me help you. You know, it's natural for a lot of us to be like, thank you, hold this, and like, let's go. But I also think that like from my experiences, just see how far you can go by yourself, but you will need help as you go forward for sure.
I agree. Because, you know what, when I look at a lot of the things happening now, and you know, you mentioned the TikTok stuff before, and what's interesting about that is, like, last year, Corona was interesting because you saw not only, obviously, the pandemic and kind of how that all worked out and changed the landscape of music, but a lot of artists who I had on the show last summer were artists from labels who were signed off of a TikTok deal. And what I mean by that is like they had a big single on TikTok and they got signed. And that is interesting to me because it's good and a bad thing because you see artists who may have been homeless a year ago now have, you know, a house, a car, you know what I'm saying? Kind of they've been able to build that life for themselves. But then also, you know, labels are signing artists off just a single. You know what I'm saying? And then that kind of goes to what you were saying about like go as far as you can. And you know, in the pandemic, everything's so unsure. You're like, can I go further without a label at this point?
Yeah.
And that makes me think about what artists' mindsets were last year, where it's like, oh shit, like all right, I got this video, this single on TikTok that got 500,000 videos and growing. Like Charlie D'Amelio and all these people are doing a dance to it. Do I like, you know, I got to sign this deal? Because I don't, you know, I can't perform, I can't do this, so this is the best course of action, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what you deem as your definition of success. Like,
yeah,
it's tricky. Like, yeah, the success off TikTok, I'm kind of removed from that world, but it seems like a lot, like those deals that you're talking about, a lot of them are driven off of, you know, money and popularity.
Right.
And those are the two things. How much money do you have? How many followers do you have? Are people paying attention to what you're doing? And it's just pure business. I think that's like important. And don't get me wrong. I mean, again, I don't really know what I'm talking about at all, but it's like my impression is that like at one point streaming was breaking the mold. And now I feel like it's gotten to a place where streaming actually saved music business and the record labels. And so I think they've kind of got it under control. There's still a sense of music discovery, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah, I still think that there's some authentic discovery, but for the most part, when it comes to like movies, music, I'm getting it from like my friends and like somebody. It's word of mouth is still to me the most powerful as far as authentic, you know, promotion. But as far as the TikToks and the streaming playlists and stuff, I could be wrong, but I think I'm under the impression that's all kind of controlled, so to speak. You know,
definitely,
it's all kind of like paid for, bought and paid for you by Pepsi. You know,
right? I think YouTube is like the most authentic form of music,
but it's so hard. I mean,
now.
Again, like it's so fragmented, and there's so many artists, new artists every day. Like, how could you possibly break through without joining forces with somebody that can help you break through?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Right, because everything has changed over the past year. You know what I'm saying? Like what the music, how to break through as a musician in 2019 is not the same thing as 2021 because, you know, the rules were literally changed during the pandemic. Like we had TikTok before the pandemic, we had Triller before the pandemic, but it wasn't until the pandemic that those apps really were able to take off. Totally. And now you got to look at it and you're like, oh man, like everything's changed, like how the promotion of music's changed. Obviously the playlists are a thing now you know what I'm saying?
That's what people deem as successful, right? If they're like, yo, my song got put on this playlist, so now I have X amount of plays, I'm killing it. But have you done a show? And I'm not saying yes or no to this, but I think it's also important to go do a show and see how many people that just streamed your song show up to come watch you perform. Right. To me, that still seems to be a good defining moment of like, are people interested in what you're doing? Because a lot of people with music right now, the way they're interacting with it, it's just on. They're just putting on a playlist and maybe they'll say, yo, I really like this and I'm going to add it to my own stuff. But they might just listen to a playlist, hear that song and never go back to it. So that's the kind of thing of like when you start talking about like the qualitative elements of these plays. Are people actually listening to your song, adding it to your playlist, and running it back? Obviously, they have this data, or are they just kind of skimming through it? So, record labels and the streaming, they've been able to get hardcore information and data off of and make very educated decisions. So there's no real risks being taken anymore as far as I like this artist and I'm going to promote this artist just because I think they're fucking cool. Right. Instead, it's kind of like, well, the kids like the shit and everybody's doing dances to the shit, and so it's on. Not one's right and the other's wrong. It's just that's kind of the state of things, how I see it anyway.
No, yeah, I definitely agree, because I definitely have caught myself just hitting the playlist and press play, and I remember, I'm not gonna say what playlist or what platform or what artist, but I remember there was this one artist who I'm pretty sure is a one-hit wonder up until now. I don't know. I haven't seen anything else from him. But I remember that artist was on a playlist. And I remember I would put this playlist on when I would go running. And I heard that same song on that playlist for literally probably 3 months straight. And I was like, all right, if this is a playlist that's supposed to be updated regularly, why is this like this, right? And to your point about artists being on those playlists and then kind of being like, okay, who's gonna show up to your show? I feel like one artist, so I went to a Young Nudie show recently, and I don't know if Nudie is heavy on being placed on playlists. I know he has some big records, but I don't know if he's heavy on because you look at the playlist, you'll see the Baby, you'll see Drake, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know if he's necessarily a playlist artist. I could be wrong. But when you go to his show, you see how passionate his fans are. And even when people are jumping in the mosh pit, things like that, you really see it. For and sure. I'm like, okay, cool. His fan base is a fan base. Right. That's a fan base, because they know what they came to Irving Plaza because they knew that they were gonna fucking rage and turn the fuck up to this man's music. They didn't even care that he was on stage. They were fucking turning up. And that's what I feel like is the difference there. You know what I'm saying? Because you could be on a playlist, but how many people are gonna show up to your show realistically when you come to New York? You know what I'm saying? And then you have artists who aren't on these big playlists, but they pack the house.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely a fan and rooting for people to have careers. I want people to have careers. I want them to go through the seasons of their own careers and grow and watch somebody do something in 2021 and then see what they come up with in 2030. Right. I love watching the evolution of artists, but I feel like maybe, and obviously I'm just getting older and I have my own life and things that I need to pay attention to, but I feel like those are down to few and far between of careers that we get to watch,
Right. And your career is interesting because the music, watching your music grow to now, when I was really going into my super deep dive of the past couple years of what you've been doing, and kind of this I don't know how to describe it, this earthy type of music you've been making, even with the
Earthy's cool. I'll take that.
Earthy. Yeah. I watched the Sway interview. I listened to the Sway interview too, and the way that they were talking about it, I was trying to put into my own words what I felt like it was that you were making, because it's interesting and I like it. And you know what I'm saying? It feels like a body of work, and I know that you've said that this kind of feels like I forgot what exactly you said, but I know it was something along the lines of this is a proper body of work, and you feel creatively full, full and whole, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that specifically Greenhouse Effect Volume 3. We'll talk about that for a second. Is that that for me was a new challenge. My whole career so far up to this point was, a major label record and that experience, right? And then I had kind of independent releases and that experience, and kind of half in, half out with Paps and Jazz. And then Retro Hash, which I've kind of built my entire career around, was this 2014 defining moment where I decided I wanted to be as independent as possible, just as far as decisions and being a voice of integrity and making sure that when I speak, it is something that people can trust. So that's 2014. And so that was my first independent record. So after that, there's obviously different things I was doing. The Lemonade series out in LA with Chuck and a couple friends, and then That's Cute was off the heels of that, and just these little singles here and there. And then I ended up moving back to Philadelphia.
Okay, right. And a couple years ago, right?
This is a couple years ago. This is around 2017. I moved back to Philadelphia, and that's when things started to get kind of interesting, because I wasn't part of the game. Like when you're in LA, you can roll out of bed and get to work. I mean, like for instance, we had a podcast, Radical Magical, in LA, and we had it at Dash Radio, and we could just kind of roll out of bed and go plug into a podcast. With Philadelphia, that stuff is not as readily available. Like there's not a large entertainment business there. There's not like booming tech or anything like that. So it's very DIY. You kind of have to build it yourself. And so we did that with a, excuse me, an outdoor venue, Sunflower Philly. Sorry, the outdoor venue, Sunflower Philly. But most importantly, when that pandemic hit, was just kind of entering into a new challenge. And we tapped into fans and followers and set up a Discord. And we wanted to create an album with just not necessarily people who were in the business. And like you see it all the time on the radar, is like there's so many talented people that might just not get the opportunity. And so that was big for me in Philly. Was just like, one, a new challenge, and two, creating this tape around artists and very talented songwriters that just might not have gotten the opportunity. That's mainly the only difference between me and them. And so Greenhouse Effect Volume 3 was this collaboration with fans. All the beats were done by fans. All the guest verses, they wrote them themselves. And you started to kind of empower people and kind of like delegate a little bit. All I really did was coach. You know, I was kind of like...
You were the professor.
I was the professor.
You were the professor, yeah.
You know, so, and just kind of sitting down and talk to them. And around week 6, we got like this like theme of what we wanted it to be about. And the Greenhouse Effect Volume 3 started to be around cultivating of marijuana. And patience.
The growing of it.
Yeah, the growing of pop, man. And so, you know, just responding to what you're saying, it's like my career has gone through kind of like these peaks and valleys and all over the place. But for me, like, you know, we see it in entertainment all the time. There's been a human element to it. And I feel like I'm okay. I feel like I never got into a space where I felt alone. There were a couple moments like heartbreak and stuff like that I experienced, but I was having all of these human experiences that are so important, and I think sometimes get tossed to the side or become, you know, secondary when you're dealing with entertainers and entertainment. It's like you see it all the time with like the dialogue around Robin Williams, and you see it all the time with mental health and the discussion of mental health.
Which I do want to talk with you about mental health eventually later on.
And like this is probably a segue into it. I think like a lot of the times that stuff gets put on the back burner for the sake of making yourself and other people money. Right. And there's always this kind of like, you know, do it now so you don't have to do it later kind of thing.
Yep.
And so that's just, you know, people need to keep in mind that's not fact. That's kind of an ideology, and like to like keep the things running. Work now, work while you're the healthiest so you can enjoy it later. But there might not be a later, or you might be putting yourself in a position where you're very unhealthy with the relationships in your life, unhealthy with your work relationship and stuff like that. And so I felt like in my career, what I've been able to do is keep a nice balance. And, you know, that has been extremely important and rewarding to me.
Right. I love that. And I want to get into the mental health thing, but one thing that I wanted to know about what you were saying that I personally love, because I saw some of like the live streams that you did on with the Discord stuff on you put it on your YouTube page. And I thought that was a really cool way to incorporate it, because like, you know, when I looked at the project, I'm like, all right, all these guys, I don't really know who these guys are. And then like, obviously as I dove deeper into it, like I understood the what you were trying to do with it. I saw the live streams, it all made sense. And I thought that was pretty cool, because, you know, you have worked with big artists in the past, and it was kind of an interesting tonal shift to kind of make it a collaborative project between you, your fans, and some of these young guys. So what I wanted to ask is like, when you were kind of, as you took on this role of like the professor and the coach, on this project, what were like some of the pointers, the tips, like what were you kind of telling like these young producers and these young artists while you were working on this project? Because I'm sure you had to give them some type of game.
Sure. No, I think that was probably the most valuable thing for them, was the constructive criticism and critiquing of their work. I think that's like, we don't find that a lot with some of our friends. Like my cousin Zach's here, he's good because he'll give you honest feedback. You know what I mean? Like, you know, but a lot of the time people just be like, yo, it's dope, it's cool. There's nothing we can do with that. As far
you got to tell people it sucks if it sucks.
But,
like, come on.
And I think that's fair, especially if you're if you're asking for someone's feedback. People shouldn't be, you know, hold back as far as you can have their opinion. Just know how you feel about the art. And so I think that was the constructive criticism and the feedback. Most importantly was, you know, do your thing, because I think a lot of the time what we're finding, I think there's a joke about it in the world right now on YouTube, is like a like beat. Is that what it's called?
Yes, it is a like beat. Yep, yep. Or type beat.
Type beat. And so the type beat kind of thing is a conversation in the world of rap music right now. And you're finding a lot of derivatives or referential art. And so it started with me, you know, I think around a conversation around Deltron 3030 and just using a starting point sonically for these producers. But what I found was when I was giving them references, what I found was they were just kind of mimicking the reference. And so like I felt like that was just kind of sucking and sapping all the creativity out of the exercise and the experiment. And so like I got away from that and just started giving people BPMs, and you would get the coolest, most original ideas back. And so I think that was always the most important thing, and a lot of really important for a lot of people right now is to do the work, be uncomfortable, put yourself in uncomfortable situations and really figure out who you are. Because I think like, you know, through fashion and music and all these things right now, it's very easy to kind of like disguise yourself within a scene. And this is really hard to tell somebody growing up because, you know, when I was growing up, well, you have like and one or, you know, that's the stuff that you're wearing and like that's part of the world, you know? And so I don't want to tell any kids to like, you know, go your own way. But I think it is important for like, you know, kids that are growing up and when we're being mass influenced, you know, we're all kind of influenced by the same things, filtered through the same things, to kind of take a moment, go through stuff and really, you know, do the work to figure out who you are. And that helps on an artistic level with producers, but that also helps on a human level.
Right. I agree. And I love that you were able to help those guys get out of their shells. You know what I'm saying?
It's hard, man.
No, it is. It is hard.
We develop these routines, we develop these habits and these patterns, and they're really hard to break.
Right. It's like me with interviews. Like sometimes like there is a certain flow for interviews, like especially with new artists and with some of like, you know, the drill artists. I feel like there's a certain like kind of like pointers I hit, you know what I'm saying? Because they're young, you know what I'm saying? Like they don't have the life experiences yet that are really for us to be able to deep dive like the way you and I are deep diving into things right now. But it is interesting to talk, but like those are habits that I try to break. But you know, in certain cases you can't break those habits because of X, Y, and Z. But like an interview like this isn't like a typical flow of like those interviews, right? Because this is a different type of conversation, but I like how you were able to get them out of that. So now going to the mental health stuff. So for you, it was really about kind of like finding that balance between, I guess, like the work, which would be the music, and then your life, and kind of also doing the things you wanted to do with like the Sunflower Philly stuff, correct? So how were you able to like balance that and manage that? Because, you know, I think one of the biggest conversations we have now, and I was just saying this earlier, is like dealing with like the work-life balance of everything, which is hard in this industry.
Well, it's kind of driven by fear, right? Like
definitely by
like
fear.
That, like you're not going to have enough money, or maybe from an ego standpoint, you'll be irrelevant. And so I think the answer to your question is I did learn and start saying no.
Ooh.
And I think that when I first started saying no and practiced saying no, it was really met with resistance, and that I was becoming quote unquote difficult to work with, or all of these things. But that was never my truth. It was just that here is the way that I wanted to go. And if I kept saying yes to things, I'd probably be, you know, sucked dry. And so I think that's the most important thing for me, and maybe health in general, is learning to say no. And that might be as simple as somebody inviting you out for drinks, and you don't really want to go, but you go anyway. I mean, those are like little small practices of when you say no. I mean, same thing. It's like, I love sugar, bro. I love desserts. I have a sweet tooth. And sometimes I want a little treat in the middle of the night that I know is going to mess up all of my sleep. And sometimes I do it for sure. But that self-love and that discipline, sometimes you got to just say no. And so that's what I think would be as far as a good starting point for a lot of people who are trying to work through it, is, you know, practice it with little things and just kind of like, you know, say what you mean. Say what you mean. You know, sometimes I say yes to things when I want to say no, and or sometimes I say no when I want to say yes. And so I don't think there's any harm in just like, you know, saying what you mean and understanding that, you know, your words have value to them. That's, I guess, the best way that I could put it.
And I personally have a difficulty with saying no, because, you know, when you first start off doing something, I'm sure you could relate to this. It's like you want to do everything. You know what I'm saying? Because you're like, you start getting that success, you start building, and then, you know, you get things like not handed to you, but like you get the reach outs, this and that, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. And then you kind of reach this point where like the wave is like getting too big, and then you're like, oh shit, like I'm getting hit up too many times. Like, how do I say no to all these people? But one thing that I've realized these past couple months of this show kind of getting to where it's at is that those people are still going to be there. And those people will most likely reach back out to you for something else. And maybe that next time will be the sometime that you actually want to do something. You know what I'm saying? Whether it be, you know, an artist coming on or something like that. I know it's different than when we were talking about like somebody asking you out for a drink. But that's how I kind of like related in my mind. You know what I'm saying?
For sure. And like, you know, to your point about those people, you know, always being there, you would also hope that those people understand when you're saying, hey man, I just, you know, if you're speaking in, again, honest feedback or honest critique or anything, if you're being honest, I think like majority of people will understand. And if they don't, they're probably not people that should be in your life. You know what I mean? So it's really tricky when you start getting money and business involved, because to your point and like to the world of, you know, work, you kind of have to say yes to things you don't want to say yes to. Just to survive. So, and I think that's real. And so just, again, it's a balanced thing. It really is a balanced thing.
Word. So what are your kind of like, you know, when you're dealing with your mental health, what are like some exercises or things that you practice, or like what do you kind of do?
Well, I mean, I have my own stuff going on. Like, first of all, drink mad water and get good sleep. Like, first and foremost.
Get good sleep is something I need to work on. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we have it in the rap world where it's just the grind mentality. You know, I'm working all the time. So I think drinking water and getting sleep is mad important. I obviously have breathing exercises and, you know, stretches and yoga stuff that I do in the morning. Is that going to be for everybody? No. But I do think some sort of exercise, going for walks, going for a bike ride, those things are really, really, really important. And simple things, when you implement them into your world, can, like, you know, help exponentially. So that's kind of what I would suggest, is like water and sleep, and then like go for walks, you know?
Yeah. You know, and when I tuned into your Sway interview, and you were talking about Shrooms on there. And what it made me think about was, there's this documentary on Netflix. I haven't gotten to watch it, but I've seen the trailer like a million times. And I think it's about like psychedelics and whatnot. And I don't remember if they went into this, but maybe I saw it on TikTok, but I know that, you know, microdosing and certain things that surround shrooms have a medicinal purpose as well when it comes to mental health stuff. Oh yeah, too.
Bro. I mean, mushrooms and psilocybin and all that discussion around what's happening right now. I know they're doing it out in Oregon. Like, there's a serious discussion around that helping cure depression, PTSD, different things. And I, you know, I don't have science in my back pocket to back it up, but I would say that there's plenty of science and data that supports those findings. And, you know, I think cannabis too, to a certain extent, and like that's why I'm an advocate for cannabis, and, you know, an advocate for mushrooms as well, and just, you know, eating well and taking care of yourself, and also, you know, the Greenhouse Effect Volume 3 in that Sway Talk, we were talking about gardening and being outside. And so at Sunflower Philly, we have our little garden there, and it's we're not growing food, but we have flowers and sunflowers, and we go out there and we weed the garden, and we're kind of hanging out with the plants, and the birds come through and the butterflies and stuff like that, and that stuff helps, man.
I love that for you, man.
It's better than reading comments.
I'm glad you brought up the Sunflower Philly stuff, because I did want to bring it up, because like that, you know, I read about it a little bit online and from what Aaron and I saw on like your Instagram and whatnot. I think that's really cool. So it's a garden that you have in Philly.
Yeah, so it's actually an outdoor venue. And so when I moved back to Philadelphia, I found myself next to this vacated lot. And so it was really just a dog park. And we didn't want to do too much about getting rid of that dog park, because specifically in the city, if you have a dog, you want a space where you can walk your dog. Do you have a dog by any chance?
I don't.
No pet? All right.
No pet, yeah.
Eris has a dog. People, like, you need spaces where you can take your pup. And so it was important to kind of keep that. But I found myself, obviously there's a whole saga and drama that went into this, but on a full moon, I found myself with one of the developers, and I asked him for a beer.
A full moon is crazy.
We were crossing the street, and we had this little fire going on in the backyard. And he had this case, he had like a 6-pack of beer. I was like, yo, can I get one of those? And he ended up giving me one, and I started talking to him about all these ideas that I had for the side yard. And I was like, if only I knew the person that was developing this land, I would talk to him. And he goes, well, I'm actually the one that's developed.
That's crazy.
And so a serendipitous kind of sit down, And like, you know, that conversation led one thing to the next, and then they came and kind of, I forget what the word's called, but like excavated the land to kind of see if they could build on it. And this is essentially looking to build condos and things like that. I guess they didn't really like what they found, and so we had a whole conversation of creating an outdoor venue that's no different than On the Radar, of a place where people that one can come and maybe even just do their first show ever, but a venue that puts on for the local music scene in Philadelphia, a lot of indie rock shows. Shout outs to Human Robot, shout out to Marley, who helps us kind of put these shows together on Thursdays, but then yoga on Wednesdays. We do a trash club, which is our trash cleanups,
nice.
you know, at least once a month. And so all of those things allow us to really cultivate community. We actually know our neighbors. I mean, it's so dope, man. When I go home and I'm going, like, I see Doug with his dog on the street, what's up, Doug? Like, see the homies, like, and like to have that in the city, it's actually strange, because I think a lot of us in the city are lonely. And so it's safe to say that Sunflower Philly has allowed me to like be a part of a community, whether it be through the garden and people coming and helping weed the garden and just hanging out with the sunflowers, or checking everybody at a live show. There's a lot of opportunity for us to just meet the people and interact with people that we live right next to.
That's incredible. So you really help build like that community up.
Oh yeah, man. It's probably my favorite social studies project. The Greenhouse Effect Volume 3 was my second favorite social studies project, but again, that was so online. But you know, Sunflower to me is probably my favorite social studies project to this day. Shout out to Melvin, shout out to Christian, Danny, Colin too, who, like all these people who really help Sunflower thrive, and big shout out to Chadwick and Mark for helping us see through.
And speaking about like the flowers, right? So your last project, Flowers on the Weekend, what I found interesting when I was going through your gram was like you posted like a different flower every type of day, and like, well, not every day, but however often you posted it, and then with like a bio. And I thought that was really cool, like kind of like how you like when we were talking about how like these projects feel like completed body of works. Like I feel like you really took the time and effort to like put the theme in and kind of like build that theme around all these projects the way that, you know, you really envisioned it, especially with the flowers.
Yeah, presentation is important. And I think Flowers on the Weekend, that was another one, like when we're talking about careers, ebbs and flows. Like that was my coming home to Philadelphia, and a lot of love to Rob Devious, who helped me put that album together. And then, you know, Flowers is, and even Sunflower Philly and Greenhouse Effect Volume 3 has been a strong point in my life of a reconnection with nature. Right. And like this kind of like call, getting back to nature and the natural world, and checking in on your relationship with the natural world, checking in on, you know, whether, I know plants are obviously popular and stuff like that as well, but like, you know, you have a plant in here and stuff like that. If you didn't have it, it changes the room, man. You know what I mean? Like this stuff is really important. And so it also, like on a microcosm, as far as patience, as far as growth, all of those things, I think there's a lot that world, whether we're talking about cannabis, whether we're talking about mushrooms, whether we're talking about sunflowers, there's a lot that world can teach us. And, you know, I think it's possible that we're slowly, you know, losing touch with it, specifically maybe the younger ones who don't deem it to be that important. Not that they don't, they might. Right. I don't talk to enough young kids to know where their heads are at.
Right. No, that's interesting. And that's interesting how you've been kind of like, how you've put in that work with the music, and then of course, like through Sunflower Philly to kind of, you know what I'm saying, do your part and kind of.
It's the same motives that you have for On the Radar.
Yeah.
It's the same motivations to just say, hey man, I want there to be a space where people can come and feel supported.
Right.
There's like, you know, Sunflower, yes, is like a glorified dog park for sure. But at the end of the day, it's just a place where we can like kind of support each other and ideas and have conversations. And again, like no different than when I was telling you about Asher Roth shows early on, where they're like, oh, I met my lover there, or I met this business partner at an Asher Roth show. Like Sunflower is slowly becoming that too, where a lot of people are like connecting and meeting up. People take their meetings in the park now. It's just a great little space like in North Philadelphia that allows us to like, you know, be outside. That's awesome. I gotta check it out when next time I'm in Philly. Please do. And we've been doing like some reflecting on like your career, and I know on All That Up, like your new single, right? Which I love. You did a lot of reflecting on that. And one of the lines was the XXL line, which I believe I wrote down. The XXL you was on the front page, right? I found that line interesting because I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on like, you know,
then to now, because you know what I'm saying, back then to now where the XXL covers are at and with the freshmen, like it's interesting. Like, are you tuned in with any of these people? Like, and I feel like now you have people from, like, okay, example, when Uzi was on the cover, right, and they did that whole freestyle that's like, you know, infamous, right? I remember that people back then were like, this is the downfall of hip hop, right? People were watching that, and then now Lil Uzi, look, I mean, you know, look, the music and the streaming and the popularity speaks for itself. Sure. But I kind of wanted to get your take on like the evolution of that and kind of where it is now and kind of how people because I know how people in my generation feel about like the new XXL like list, like people hate on it, but like I just kind of wanted your thoughts on, you know, kind of where it's at and, you know, with the newer kids who are getting on it.
Well, it's a thing, right? It's become a thing. And so like, you know, kudos to XXL for that, you know, for turning it into a thing and turning it into something that's, you know, a thing. For me, you know, my experience with it, it's funny because on Drink Champs, you know, Mickey and Blue, they were both asked, and they were just both asked about the cover of XXL. And of course, it's like, you know, it's a, you know, notorious, and it's an accomplishment for sure. And for me, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. My XXL freestyle is jokes, because I thought the challenge was supposed to be, because our year, it was like, they're not going to show your face or whatever it was, and so you have to rap so people know that it's you. Okay. I didn't know it was like a flex moment, you know what I mean? Or like, I'm going to give you straight bars, you know? I thought it was like this challenge of like, here, present a verse so everybody knows it's you. And so like, I actually didn't know what I was getting into, but now to see what it's become, and also I think that, is it XXL? It might not be. Maybe it's BET, the ciphers.
BET does the ciphers, but so does XXL. So XXL, they do freestyles, and then the ciphers, which are essentially pretty much the same thing.
Ultimately, it's cool, man. I mean, it's definitely a thing, and I think it's also a great accomplishment and a great launching pad for a lot of artists. You asked me if I'm able to keep up. Of course, as we get older, we get kind of self-absorbed, like in our own lives. So I'm not overly familiar, but you know, for what it's worth, Uzi's Philly, and that's the guy.
True. Uzi is Philly. Are there any like newer artists out here that you're listening to? I'm just curious to kind of like what you're listening
Tierra
to.
Whack is incredible.
Tierra Whack, yeah.
You know, it'd be one of those things where you'd probably have to like reel some off and ask me if I was listening to them.
We could pull up the new XXL cover.
Yeah, but chances are I'm really removed from this like the scene, so to speak, and
I'm mad at
it. So it's because it's tough, you know, and also, you know, hip hop specifically, and why it's tough for me in my world right now is because a lot of it is geared towards the adolescents, like a younger audience. And so as you get older, you almost kind of strangely get aged out. And so you really have to find a way to grow up in a very young genre. And not a lot of us can do it. It's really hard to do because the marketplace is so youthful. I'm not on TikTok, you know what I mean?
Right.
I just find that stuff to be very consuming. You know, you end up doing a lot of it. You do it all the time. You're kind of checking those things. So again, bro, it's really fucking tricky. And so everything's going to be different. But for the most part, I love what XXL has been able to turn their the segment into, and I'm happy to have been able to be in kind of an early generation of that. Word.
It's funny that, because like, you know, you said aged out, but I wanted to add like, yo, then you have like, now you got like the Benny the Butchers of the world and the Freddie Gibbs who really have reached this point as older artists in the mainstream consciousness, which I personally love because, you know, obviously I like
shout out to them, by the way. Yeah. Big shout out to Freddie. Like, I mean, those guys just like, again, just go and do your thing.
Exactly. And they've been doing their thing for a while. And then now it's cool to see the fruits of their labor and kind of, see Freddie get nominated for a Grammy, you know? And then see Benny.
Alchemist, baby. Yep. The whole game. Man.
Yep, exactly. And then see like Benny and Griselda and what they're doing, like with what Westside and Conway are doing, like it's incredible. So I think that's cool that now that there's that lane starting to really
There's an
open
audience
up.
for that.
There's an audience for that now, you know what I'm saying?
And you have to be okay with that. I think it's a little tricky when you want to appeal to everyone, especially when I was coming up. That was kind of like the school of thought, was like, let's be as popular as you can be. And I think as you get older, naturally, whether you're in entertainment or not, you start to realize that not everybody's going to like you.
Right.
You're not going to be friends with everybody. And it's very similar to like an approach in business, is like you just kind of like talk to and appeal to the people that you appeal to.
Exactly. But now those lanes are open, which is something that, you know, we were talking about before. It's like hip hop, there will always be a new lane for someone to go into, whether it's new sound like drill or whether, you know, there's like the lane for like the older artists now who are fucking killing it and getting nominated for Grammys.
And I love that because you actually, you know, you have to be good. So like to grow up in hip hop and keep going, you have to be a skilled MC. You know, you can't just be catchy.
Right. You got to like actually, and like you see that a lot with the Bennies and like the J Electronicas and shit like that.
Some
like,
of the best, they're poets, you know?
And like, who dropped the album? Was it Conway? I think Conway's album is, right? That's like the Hitler Wears Hermes. Ramel, help me out. It's West Side. My bad. My apologies. But like that 2-piece album, the A and B sides, is what I've really been listening to a lot lately, and that's what I've really been loving. And I love it. I love his ad libs, like the boom 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 boom. Like that shit is incredible. But like it's a refresher because, you know, like you said, like a lot of the music right now is obviously catered towards like the youth and TikTok and whatnot. So when you get that type of music, you're just like
yeah, it feels good.
A breather
for sure.
So what's next for you? You know what I'm saying? Now that you know you got the project out, you got the new single out. What are you kind of feeling next? Like what is next for Asher?
Typically for me, you know, I'm with the seasons. So now that fall and winter's creeping in, I'm gonna hibernate a little bit. You know, restore, like re-up my own being. And then, you know, probably in the new year, we'll see. I'm really focused on Sunflower Philly, and I really want to, you know, bring Sunflower into a space where it's just, right now it's just our nonprofit, and it would be nice to start to build some real professional parameters around it. But, you know, other than that, I'll stay creative. The Discord, if you guys ever want to jump on the Discord, that's where we like drop off acapellas and like, you know, a lot, not only that, but we're like developing and helping other artists. So people pop in there, they'll drop off an acapella, and then the producers will give them different variations back. And so it's a nice little sandbox, if you will. Right, yeah. So the Discord's going to stay active and stay alive. You know, I'll continue to just kind of release stuff as I see, and then, you know, we'll see, man. As far as what's next for me, I think Sunflower Philly and some real life experiences is just what I'm gonna.
The music is gonna be chilling for now.
Well, no, I mean the music. I really would love to go on tour. I just don't know what that's gonna look like, you know. So I'm just kind of, you know, taking it a day at a time. We'll see what touring looks like at the, you know, beginning of next year, February, March of next year.
Ooh, an Asher Roth tour in 2022. Dope, very exciting, man.
For sure.
I definitely got to be at the New York show. Well, I mean, I got to say, I don't know if I said this at the beginning of the interview, but you took the train here. I ain't going to tell people where we are.
Yeah.
But you took the train here. Absolute legend. You know, the other day when I had Guap Dad 4000 here from the West Coast, he also took the train here.
Yeah, I take the train. Shout out to Guap Dad.
The legends take the train. Yeah. I love that. And, you know, I love having you here, and I love being able to have these different conversations about, like, you know, your career, mental health, and kind of where your head is at now. And even with Sunflower Philly, it's dope to get to sit down with you and kind of see this whole evolution and where you are now.
And I appreciate the platform. I know a lot of other people appreciate the platform as well. And maybe we'll check back in a few months and see where everything's at. Very
exciting. Well, before we sign off here, let the people know where they can follow you at. Anything else you want to promote, now's the time to do it. That camera right there.
Cool. You already know Asher Roth, ASHERROTH, Twitter, Instagram. Those are pretty much what I'm on. Twitter's my baby. I feel like as far as like
love Twitter.
As far as my social media drug is concerned, Twitter's probably what I'm on. So if you need anything, just give me a shout on DM. And then retrohash.com is where we have everything. That's RETROHASH. Retrohash.com. That's where you can get the legacy, you know.
Boom. Well, there you have it, man. Make sure you go follow him. Make sure you go run up the single, the project, all that good stuff.
Yeah, all that up. That video is going to be out soon. That's probably my favorite as far as, like, you know, as far as, like, understanding that careers are going to take many twists and turns. Take your time with it. Enjoy it. And understand that the most valuable moments are these little memories that you're creating along the way. Save your money, obviously. Take care of yourself. Pay yourself first. That's a big
Word.
You know, lesson to learn. Pay yourself first and then pay out. And then once you do that, you know, everything kind of falls in place. But enjoy the ride, enjoy the memories, and hopefully you have some things to talk about when you're older.
Boom. Well, it's been a pleasure. An absolute legend. Asher Roth on the radar. Appreciate you, bro.
Hey, thanks,
Thank you.